Ladies and gentlemen, gamers, welcome back to the channel. Today's video is going to be all about update 1.3.0, Umber Wasp, releasing next week, Wednesday. This was released by Relic on Thursday. I was late to get this out because I was out of town. I just got home this evening and I'm recording now, watching this for the first time with you guys. So if you guys haven't seen this yet, we'll walk through it. I'll give my perspective. And I'm really excited for some of the things in store. I saw some of the preview posts on Twitter or X. Still got to get used to that. That Relic was putting out. I saw the new 4v4 map. It looks fantastic. I saw the changes to ping. I know they're going to be addressing some gameplay changes and input delay changes. So very excited to see what exactly Relic has in store and how they're bringing the game up to optimal form for the expansion in December. So without further ado, guys, let's go ahead and jump into the overview.
Hi, first off, I'm Gabby. I am the lead CM on Company of Heroes. I am replacing John for today on the guest host position, and I have 3 guests with me today to talk about a bunch of stuff from Umber Wasp. So we have Will, Miguel, and Jason. You can introduce yourself if you want.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, everyone.
All right. So Will is our map designer, Miguel, gameplay designer, and Jason, I would say balance. You're focusing mostly on balance, right?
Yeah.
So gameplay designer as well, focused on balance. All right. So today we'll actually cover what's most important in Umber Wasp. So we have gameplay improvements. We're going to do a showcase of the new V4 map. We're going to detail the changes for the 1v1 Patinal farmlands. Sorry. And we're going to go over some of the most important balance changes. If you want to know more about Company of Heroes news, you can follow us on social and join our forums, Discord, etc. Starting next week, you will also be able to get news directly in-game through the newsfeed. So this is also new to Umber Wasp. All right, let's jump into it. Let's start with gameplay improvement. So I have a list here that I'm putting up on the stream. We're going to go with Miguel over some vehicle pathfinding changes, infantry pathfinding changes, unit selection, what we're doing for this, as well as some of the ping changes and tactical map changes. So Miguel, I'm going to start running all our before and after for pathfinding, and you can tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So we already did pathfinding changes for 1.2, so this is the follow-up. In this one, we are touching a little bit of the vehicle pathfinding again, as well as the infantry one was left out for 1.2. For vehicles, we have some pretty good changes. One of the things we wanted to tackle was with the addition of phasing in the last patch. Now we want to stop, or will stop people from being able to stop their vehicle on top of other vehicles. So basically, you cannot stop midway through the phase. The vehicle will always finish the phasing through. Another thing that we did was we noticed that phasing through didn't really have enough cost associated with it from a player perspective. So we did add a speed debuff to the phasing now, so vehicles and team weapons when phasing through, they will have a little bit of a slowdown. Another thing that was called out by the community was the long-range pathfinding. So for this one, we did 2 things. One of them is that when doing normal move orders at a long range, often the vehicle will do some diagonals or not a straight path to the location. So we fixed that, and now the vehicle should do more of a straight path to wherever the player clicks. The other thing that we noted was that when issuing attack orders with vehicles, the vehicles will somewhat would do the same behavior, where they would do some diagonal paths.
Mm-hmm.
This was especially noticeable or bad with vehicles that are casemate vehicles, where you want the vehicle to be facing the enemy at all times.
Yeah, so
because
give me a little second. I'm gonna try to show people exactly what you're talking about, because this is running in the background. And so in terms of targeting, you were saying,
yeah,
we're gonna look at the targeting here again, like the video, while you're explaining.
Yeah, so previously vehicles would do this diagonal to the right or to the left in order to get closer to the enemy vehicle when it was an attack move order, when they could perfectly just do a line to the enemy and keep their gun facing the enemy. This is really important for those types of vehicles. So again, I think this will be a really good change and really noticeable in terms of gameplay impact. Another thing that we did was for the normal movement order. Again, they are somewhat different in what comes to how pathfinding handles things. So this is a change for both the targeting and the normal move order.
All right. What about infantry changes?
Yeah. So infantry was the focus for this one, even though we did a lot of vehicle changes as seen previously. For infantry, there were a lot of pathfinding changes and somewhat other changes to address some response from infantry. So
okay, so you see how this unit right here breaks off from the squad and starts running around this wall. If this unit, this one single unit model gets caught by an MG, for example, let's say the MG's over here and it suppresses this single model, the whole squad will get suppressed. So this little inconsistency with squad cohesion could really screw things up in terms of just like overall responsiveness of your commands, especially in tight-knit corners and city, urban combat, close combat fighting in these little areas. I think this is a really good change. It's going to just make it your overall experience a little bit more responsive with your infantry, which I like a lot.
We changed some of the ways that, for example, we handle infantry leaving out of buildings, so that should feel more responsive. For pathfinding in particular, we had a look at how infantry was basically choosing their paths as well. And we basically removed what was a cover preference that was really hidden to the player. So previously, infantry would actually choose paths that had more cover in the path, which often meant that from a player perspective, this was really not that well surfaced, which meant that infantry would sometimes take some detour paths just because it had better cover, where now they'll actually take the direct path.
That's great.
Again, like the
great change.
The behavior that is wanted here is that from a player perspective, you really want to be able to tell where your unit is going to move through. So anything that makes that behavior more unpredictable, we are trying.
So not only should it be consistent, like Miguel is saying, so you know exactly where your unit's going, but you want the most direct path, because oftentimes you're right-clicking on a unit to move up to a cover that you want him to get to as soon as possible. You don't want him to be taking the scenic route in green cover the entire time, because oftentimes you're not under fire or in combat, right? You're moving onto the front line or into a position of cover. So that's a really good change. I'm not sure why that priority was there in the first place, but it's nice to see that fixed.
Trying to phase that out. Another one was that I see that in the video. So the other one is retreat.
Yep.
So previously we had problems with infantry just doing infinite retreat loops.
This is
it was really actually really easy to trigger on the bridge maps, where if you blocked the path, the infantry would just like touch the vehicle, loop around, and it would never stop the retreat. Something that we wanted to address there was how to make things consistent. And the design pattern there is that once you press retreat, you should feel secure that your units will actually do their best to get back to base.
Mm-hmm.
So what we added there was that infantry, while retreating now, can phase through things. If they can path around, they'll still attempt to do that. But if there's literally no other path, they will do that through friendly vehicles and enemy vehicles.
Okay, I'm not sure what we're looking at right now, but in terms of retreating, not only should this be a change, what Miguel just talked about, but I've also noticed, even without obstructions, like Sherman's blocking a bridge, even without that obstruction, I've noticed quite a bit of input delay regarding your retreat. Like you could hit R to retreat or whatever retreat button you use, and there's like a 1 or 2 second delay where the unit like glitches out, or the unit delays and pauses, or does a little loop around and then retreats. If you can get a snappy retreat where like on command instantly the unit is just booking it back to base, beeline straight back to base as quick as possible, it just really improves the overall gameplay experience, because it really is the difference sometimes in a squad wipe. So I hope that's a change coming, or coming soon, because there still is a bit of that, and especially with team weapons, I've noticed it quite a bit. But anyways, let's go ahead and see what we have for this specific screen.
Another thing that is really meaningful to infantry is that they weren't able to pass through some of the team weapon bonding boxes. So what we did is we now allow infantry to pass through the team weapon, which should be a lot better, or feel a lot better, tight corridors. Lots of maps had these problems.
Okay, so there's no team weapons here, but I think what Miguel is saying, what they're trying to show here, is that the units are going to smoothly move through not only tight corridors, like this little tight corridor here, this little area here, but also if there's a bunch of AT guns in the way, they're going to just be able to move right through the AT guns and the team weapons, instead of having to like get glitched around them or kind of get blocked by them. So that's a really good change as well, I think, especially when things get really, if units are too close, sometimes they get a little sticky with each other. So I think that's a good change.
Another thing that I saw that the video is showing is that the infantry entities or soldiers from a singular squad will now take less, will basically fidget less.
Okay, so as you guys can see here, I think they're trying to show that moving along the cover, the units are getting off cover. As you can see here, all these units are detached from green cover, and they're kind of like clumped around, not in a really good line formation. So if units are all in cover and they're moving in green cover as well in a straight line, I think that's awesome. It not only looks really cool, it's not only really tactical. The units are not only staying in green cover the entire time, but you're getting that responsiveness that you need. Once again, MG suppression is not going to be as prevalent here, right? Because your units are not leaving green cover. So you're going to be able to move along cover like this long wall, more tactically, which I think is awesome.
When going through tight corridors as well. So what it should feel like is that entities will not, or soldiers will not, go back and forth anymore when going through tight spaces. They should now just smoothly, every single soldier go through the corridor. This is actually really noticeable as well with what was being shown in the video. So when you have a piece of cover, previously going back and forth in the piece of cover would mean that some soldiers would basically get off the formation because they would attempt to avoid the soldier that was in front of them. So now, hopefully, when doing or when changing the cover position, soldiers should feel a lot more responsive. And finally, another thing that we did that we noticed was squad cohesion. So squad cohesion is a really important aspect of Company of Heroes, and it can mean the difference between your squad getting suppressed or not suppressed if one entity or one soldier basically goes off course. So what we did is we adjusted basically how the infantry or the soldiers react to the rest of the infantry squad, and now they should prefer to stick with the rest of their squad and not go around obstacles.
Yeah.
Which, again, could, in many maps, mean the difference between getting into the arc of fire of a team weapon or not.
100%. I agree.
There's something extra that we added. that is not
That
strictly
one-
pathfinding.
Yeah, that one we don't have a video about, but you can
Yeah.
definitely talk about it.
So we added a little bit of vehicle crushing back. This
Ooh.
only happens though if the infantry is pinned. So now if the infantry is pinned and you have a medium vehicle go over them, you will kill and crush the infantry.
Oh, wow. Very
Okay.
interesting.
So only when the infantry is
Yes.
pinned. So this is
Yes.
not the comeback of vehicle crushing everywhere on the map, right?
Yes, it's not.
Very
No.
interesting.
Okay, just making sure we're making things very clear here. Okay, so we went over pathfinding. Now, do you want to talk to us a little bit about unit selection? Because that was in our
Mhm.
roadmap for this update, and ultimately, what are we doing about that?
Yeah, so with unit selection, we actually had a lot of changes that we were able to do earlier than expected. And that was what we saw with the 1.2.3 patch that we released, where we brought a lot of those unit selection changes that should have been for 1.3. But that is to say that the work is still ongoing and we'll do more. So basically what is going to be happening for 1.3 is that we made a lot of the selection for weapons that are on the ground or team weapons to be more easily selectable. Whereas before you would have to almost the micro adjustments to be able to select the thing and pick it off the ground.
Yeah.
But there are more changes coming, although we had to push them to the next update. But things that community has been calling out that we want to address is when you have multi-selection, often the retreat or the reverse button will be hidden.
Yes.
So we'll do more of what Company Virus 2 did, which is when you have multi-selection, retreat and reverse actually get split into different abilities. They do not overlap anymore.
Thank you. Thank you.
And we also have changes to the way the priority of the decorators. So we pushed a change in 1.2 that made it easier to select vehicles when lots of infantry was around them. But that ended up causing another problem with vehicles now actually have more priority than decorators. So often you want to select like an engineer that's repairing a vehicle and you end up selecting the vehicle. So something that we are doing to address that is we are making the decorators actually have the highest priority, so that shouldn't happen anymore.
And
And-
just to be clear here, this is part of the changes that are not coming in the next update, right?
Correct.
Yes.
We needed a little bit more time to do those changes, but for weapon selection, those should go in, and that's also a pain point in the live game.
Yep. All right. Thank you. Okay, so ping changes. So in the last update, there were a first change to the pings. Let me just throw us in full screen here and showing what the ping will look like in this next update. So sorry, I am fiddling with the videos. There we go. So do you want to talk a little bit about the improvements we made to pings?
Looks better.
Yeah.
Looks better.
So now we have this light beam that you can see on your screen. That is to improve visibility of the ping. So a big problem that we had was just how clear the pings were. If a player used them, we really want other players to be able to notice them. So now they have this big beam, and it's big enough that on urban maps with big buildings, you should still be able to more or less see where the ping is.
Yeah. I like it.
We also have a unique cursor when actually doing the ping, so that before you do it, you can see which ping you have selected or you're about to do. We have new animations or effects on both the minimap and the tactical map. That is also to enforce that readability that was previously missing. And
that's actually really nice. So on the screen, if your screen is on the ping, you're going to obviously see this colorful beam. It doesn't look the best, but honestly, it's very, very visible for your teammates in particular. So that's the most important thing. You're going to hear the ping audibly. You're going to be able to see it very clearly, especially in these night maps, right? And then also, if you look at the mini map, you're also going to the type of ping doesn't really matter as much, in my opinion, whether it's attack or defense. it doesn't matter as much. But the fact that you can see the symbol on the minimap as a teammate is huge, right? So if my teammate says I need support here, right? Well, where is here? You don't know. But if you can quickly look at the minimap and you can see where that icon is, you can just click on that location on the minimap, like right here, for example, and you're there. So I love this change. I think this is a really cool, dynamic way to be able to communicate with your team. Obviously, with comms, with headsets, it's optimal. But even without it, it's going to make communication with randoms 100%, or I don't know, 100 times better. That's a little of an over exaggeration, but a lot better, right? So I like this change a lot.
And also, we added a little bit of some safety to what would be player griefing. So there are cooldowns to these, and using one ping will remove the previous ping to avoid instances where your teammate might be using a lot of these and making it harder to play the game.
I mean, spamming and distracting.
Yes.
That is a really good addition. All right. Okay, so tactical map. I don't have the visual right now because it's been actually released on social media, but if you missed it, do you want to just talk a little bit about what changes we made to
This is my favorite change personally. I love this change.
With tactical map, this is one of the improvements we have been wanting to make for a while. So previously it could be hard to read the tactical map, just in the sense that you have so many big icons and it's harder to select some of the icons or some of the units. So what we did is we reduced that, and also we actually centered the shield on top of the unit. So now you don't have the disconnect between where the unit is and where the decorator is on the tactical map. But I'm just going to leave a sneak peek that there will just be a little bit more changes coming to make that tactical map look a little bit better as well.
Nice. Awesome.
Okay, well, thank you, Miguel. And if we get more questions in the chat, I'll throw them to you as we go. Now we're going to switch up and go see what's up on the map side of things. So we're going to start by talking a little bit about the reworked map, and then we're going to talk about the 4v4 map, and finally a little thing that we're changing for the next update.
Excited for the 4v4
Will, before
map.
you start, I will throw us to actual gameplay on the new map. So I know that you are very excited to present that to everyone.
This is not the new map.
Yeah. So while we're getting the game warmed up, so we have mentioned we're doing a bit of a rework of the 1v1 version of Pacino Farmlands, or Pacino. Sorry, Marco. This is a simple rework. We don't want to go overboard on some of our maps. For those of you who were aware, Pacino launched originally as a 2v2 map. We saw some potential in making a 1v1 version, but the version that we launched with wasn't as good as we wanted. The territory in particular wasn't really conducive of competitive gameplay. So that was the main focus. So the new version of Pacino, not what you're seeing on screen, this is the new map. Pacino is now a nighttime map. It has a more competitive territory layout. It's received loads of cover changes, and it plays in a different direction to the 2v2 version. It will still be very familiar. It's not going to be visually starkly different. We didn't want to turn it into a brand new map. We wanted it to be familiar. But yeah, this is something that I can easily work on in the background when our artists are working on other things. So, for example, while our artist was working on Seuss Wetlands here, that's my opportunity to look at some bugs and look at some improvements to our other maps, and Pacino was the top of the list.
Okay, so they're talking obviously about Pacino, the other map that they showed with the ping selection. But look at this map, honestly, and I'm really excited for 4v4 maps. I'm a big fan of large team games. If you guys haven't noticed, that's my favorite aspect of this game. What I love most about the CoH franchise is the team games. I think it's the best team game RTS in the genre, period. I don't think anything even comes close. to be honest. And this franchise, this game, has always brought me together with my friends and family, and that's why I'm really excited for just more team game maps, because if I could focus more on 4s, on 3s, and 2s even, it's just such a fun experience to be able to play with your squad, right? And so we've had a lot of night maps. Magnano Gap is okay. I would say Winterline is my favorite, but just looking at this map, this is my first time seeing this map. Just looking at this, looking at the mini map and the layout, looking at the aesthetic, how good it actually looks, the sand, the contrast, the lighting, it looks beautiful. Honestly, hats off to the guys at Relic who worked on this and designed this. You guys did a fantastic job. But I am really excited for this one. I think it looks very cool. I can already see some cutoffs on each side, it looks like. I believe. I could be wrong there. But really, really liking this map so far, and I can't wait to see more of it. Hopefully we get to see the entire thing, but let's go ahead and continue.
On that note as well, even though we haven't mentioned them by name, we are also constantly making improvements on all of our other maps. So, for example, I know that there's a divided player base on Taranto Coastline, which is another one of our 1v1 maps. That has also received a number of territory and pathfinding updates. Not as much as Pekino, but we know that this is not the most competitive map, and we've made some tweaks to make it a little bit more. On that note, we specifically with Taranto wanted to get rid of a load of blockers. So things like big rocks have been removed so that you can open the map up once heavy crush vehicles come into play. I'm seeing comments about Taranto being the best map. Yeah. But across the board as well, we've also made some tweaks to assets. Minor things that you may not notice, but hopefully will make all of our maps feel a lot better, especially our Africa maps. We, for example, had a pile of rocks, which was heavy crush. Especially if you think about Road to Tunis, there were some lines of cover there that were always heavy crush and are difficult to remove. And they are now swapped out for a new variant, which is medium crush. So you can destroy them a lot earlier with AT guns or mortar fire, and you can crush them in the mid to late game, reducing the amount of cover.
What a beautiful map, man. Look at the color and the water, and I just love the overall aesthetic. Now, one thing that I've noticed with a lot of maps in CoH3 in these large team games, if you look up here, I don't know if you guys can see this on the mini-map, my cursor, but there's one VP right here at the top. There's one kind of in the center. It doesn't look fully centered to me. And that's been kind of a constant theme. Winterline had the same thing. They moved the VP around a little bit on Winterline, but these two VPs are relatively close to each other. Whereas this VP all the way down here in the south is kind of like off to the distance. It's not a really proportionate or equally distributed VP across the map, in my opinion. I could be wrong, but it does not look even to me, which is interesting because I feel like this focus forces the fight or the focus much more up here in the northern area of the map. And I wonder what the design philosophy is behind that. Is that is that to force the VP fight up here, but to have this large open flank, kind of like a secondary objective with cutoffs, perhaps more of one resource? It's hard to say, but it looks even to me at first glance. Yeah, I find it very interesting because this is like not a high priority, but it's also extremely important. Like you can hold this center VP and you can hold this VP down in the south, and you can technically hold the majority and win the game. But the team that controls one of these VPs in the north is likely to control the other, in theory at least. So I just find this very interesting. It kind of makes for large flanks or large breakthroughs. So I do wonder if that's their decision behind that. But anyways, let's continue.
So these changes have gone on across all of our maps. Also, in tandem with a load of the pathfinding and merge improvements that Miguel and the team have been doing, we have also done a lot of pathfinding improvements across all of our maps. Again, these are the sorts of things that you probably won't notice visually, but in terms of gameplay, everything will feel a little smoother. For those of you who have looked at our editor and you've tried making your own maps, you'll notice that we work on a grid system, on a 1 by 1 meter grid, which means something as small and benign as a lamppost, if it's in the wrong position, can take up a 2 by 2 meter square instead of something as small as a 1 by 1.
Look how good this map looks, man, and look how good the game looks. Like these units up here on the roof, on this like African, Middle Eastern architecture. It's just like this building looks so cool. I mean, they nailed the aesthetic and the setting. I really, really like it. I want to see what this northern part of the map looks like, so hopefully we get there, but I'm just a big fan of this.
So going through all of our maps with a fine-tooth comb and adjusting everything so that it takes up less space means that you can get more infantry into a single piece of cover. It means that vehicles have an easier time getting around buildings and walls. Generally speaking, all of our maps should play just a little smoother in this next update.
A lot of range there on that
Awesome.
MG, that Vickers.
No worries. Right, so it looks like this game is getting into the meat a little bit. We've got some early infantry engagements. So I might as well talk about this map. So if you've seen the promos already, this is Seuss Wetlands. This is our new 4 versus 4 map. It is, if I'm not mistaken, our first 4 versus 4 Africa map, which is...
So is this water up here shallow enough to cross? I think it is. From what I saw, the units up here were crossing the water. I'm not quite sure, but it's interesting.
Nice. This has been such a fun map to work on. This has been a brainchild of mine for a long time, and I'm glad we could finally see it realized. What you have in this map are 3 major sections. You've got like a desert village to the south, so in the back corner, which is kind of where this gameplay is happening. In the middle, you've got a causeway, which is a raised road that moves towards the north, and then you've got these lowlands filled with water and foliage and greenery.
It can cross the water.
And then at the very, very top of the map, you've got the walled city, the ancient walled city of Sousse, which is in Tunisia. Hopefully my camera will move more towards the north at some point. I seem to remember being stressed during this gameplay, so my camera probably doesn't leave my front line very often. But yeah, hopefully the gameplay will show some areas. It'll show the majority of the map at some point. So a little bit of history. I won't keep folks for too long. Sousse is one of those locations in Tunisia where Allied forces merged. So the British that were pushing from the east going west and the Americans from the west going east, they met at the border cities around Tunis, like Sousse.
Oh, look at this skin. Is this a skin in the game? Can someone in the comments let me know if this actually is in the game right now or if this is a new skin? Because I really want this for this map in particular. This is a really cool skin on this map. Also, another side note, if you guys saw, he's been using the grenade on the engineer constantly. I just find it hilarious how the British engineer is not only the strongest engineer in the game, but it also has grenades. So, I don't know. I feel like that's a little generous, but anyways, let's continue.
Sousse is an ancient city. It's a walled city. And it was one of the retreat points for the DAC. It was a major port, and the intention was to get as many wounded or equipment off the North African coast as they could. But the port was heavily bombed and destroyed, and the DAC essentially stayed put at Sousse and either surrendered or were defeated. It was very, very bloody fighting all the way up the coastline towards Tunis, and this is one of the major battlegrounds. I have no doubt, being a 4v4 map, we will...
Okay, so this is a small cutoff, it looks like. Very cool. I actually like this on each side to have these cutoffs. So you can apply a lot of pressure on these corners and cut off the whole south and north sections of the map. Awesome. I think that's great. I personally really like that strategic element in the game. And I also like how this map is being designed from a historical perspective. I personally totally nerd out on that stuff, so I hope several maps that are coming in the future also follow in that suit. Hats off to Relic for that as well.
You will see a lot of that style of combat. It will be very, very bloody.
You wanna
Right, what else we got?
Yeah, do you want to run us through the challenges of making this map? Because you said it was super great working on it, but I'm sure you hit some challenges, right?
Oh yeah. So 4 versus 4 maps are just so difficult to start. If you've tried making your own maps before, you'll realize that the scale is always the hardest part. I've made mention of this before in our other live streams. Getting the scale right on a map is very, very difficult. And when you look at the blank canvas of a 4 versus 4 map, it's extremely daunting. That's why I would usually recommend creating these bespoke areas, key areas that you want to focus on for the majority. And that will get you started. That will give you a scale. That will give you focus. So we have the walled city, for example, that you're looking at now.
Oh, okay. So this is a totally walled city up here, which makes the cutoff even more interesting because as you guys can see here in the minimap, you see all this dark gray. All this is walled city, which is obviously you can't garrison. So all this obstruction, all these city walls here make it hard for the team in the city defending to control some of the territory right outside the city, these roads. So let's say this team down here, yellow and blue, let's say they control the city, inside the city. Well, the Axis, right, red, if they're pushing through the center and cutting this off for a second, it's not that easy to defend this cutoff, I'd imagine, with lots of concentration of troops in the city, right? Because there's these walls. So these cutoffs, I feel like, are going to be really strong.
This is the urban area. This is the first part of the map that was built. And it was only a very basic design, but gave you an idea. And then I built the wetlands, and then I built the village to the south. And you get an idea then whether or not this map is going to be too big or too small. You really don't have much of an idea until you start playtesting. So you could be 10, 20 hours into a map before you even know if it's viable, which is difficult. But we also find that the bigger the map gets, the more you want to put in it to fill the space. But too many themes, too many things going on can make a map feel too busy. It can make a map feel like it's not very cohesive or realistic. So you'll see what could probably be considered a lot of dead space, like this area here that's on screen with the desert in the very south. There isn't much here, but that is intentional. We wanted open ground. We wanted to make it still look like it is North Africa.
I like that. I like that the open space. I really love the aesthetic of how good the sand actually looks, the lighting and the contrast. And I like how, if you guys notice, it was high ground for the defender's advantage down there. That's good use of elevation, in my opinion. I think it's tucked away in the corner. It's an easy way you can defend with less units, right? If you got sandbags and so forth. Very cool. I like that. There's not a lot of open space on the map from what I can tell. A lot of little towns and garrisons, but a neat little addition in the corner there.
We don't want to fill space unnecessarily. And that's also difficult to do. It's difficult to let yourself go and not overfill and overuse the spaces and the assets. Minimalism is a tricky thing in game design.
Okay, so once again, sorry to be pausing this every 5 seconds here, but I just realized how much elevation is here, right? So if you're holding this town, you not only have this green cover, your opponent has to pass through here. I'm assuming a lot of this is red cover or no cover, and then there's maybe yellow cover here. And here, right, in these craters, and obviously you have green cover with these vehicles. So you can move from green cover up here as the attacker into green cover here, and then eventually push up. But once again, there's this idea of the defender's advantage in this town. If you're holding and securing the town, I really like it. I don't know how it's going to play yet. Obviously, I've never played this map, but very cool. One thing about the center, it feels like there's a lot of it's relatively open because you can traverse across the water. It's shallow water, so it should feel like an open map in the center. But it's very chopped up, so it's hard to say.
We also find with bigger maps and Africa in particular, we don't have as many map assets for Africa because in Italy you have a wide variety of trees and walls and buildings and vehicles and everything, whereas Africa is rocks and sand and occasionally a shrub or two. So making a map with a lot of variety on this scale is very, very difficult without it looking too monotonous.
See this once again. The Axis, the red team, pushes through the center, cuts off this VP. Even though the allies are in the town and have it secured, all these resources are not being accounted for. There's no income. And I really, really like this. I really like this. I think it's very cool. It really gives the team in the center a serious, strategic and tactical advantage. Even if they're not able to take the town in the north or the town in the south, they can cut them off. So very cool.
But I think we've pulled it off. Our art team did an amazing job. This map is gorgeous. I really, really love how it ended up looking. Yeah.
All right.
What else have we got?
So we have a comment in the chat that says that you would need to make an actual tutorial on how to make maps because it's really nice to listening to, all your insight about maps. So do we want to say it?
Yeah, we might as well.
Yeah.
Do you want to?
Yeah.
There's a Stewart skin as well, that desert camo. Is that in the game yet? I need to know.
John has worked with Will
I don't think
on
so.
a series of tutorial on how to make a map from 0 to 100, right? From the beginning to the end. So if you want to, talk a little bit about that, feel free.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to go into too much detail, but then again, I think most of us knew this was coming. Yeah, so we made I believe it was a 6-part? Was it 5-part?
Yes.
6-part. Yeah. 6-part video series on making a map from the very, very start. So doing your basic layouts, doing territory, doing grey boxing, all the way up to your finishing art touches, everything from FX and grass, the whole shebang. We've done just about everything that you could possibly do. There's a little bit of camera trickery between episodes. I worked like a madman between recordings to keep the progress up because we didn't have enough time to record everything. But yeah, we're very pleased with it. We can't wait to get it into your hands. We appreciate that opening up mod tools and mapping tools can be very daunting, especially if it's something that you've never done before. And even though our tools seem quite complex, they are so easy once you get the hang of them. Once you get to grips with the basics, making maps for CoH3 is the easiest it's ever been. So hopefully it will be the helping hand that people need to get started and make what they've always wanted to make.
That's awesome. Thank you. To finish up on maps, we have something we want to try for the first time actually in Umber Wasp. So we had complaints before where, our maps are RNG, you release a new map and you might not see it for a little while, right? So what are we doing about that?
Yeah, so we've got a little bit of server trickery coming. We're gonna trial changing the weighting of maps. So when we launch a new map, like Sus Wetlands here, we are going to make it appear more frequently in your auto match pools.
I like that. Good change.
So this will be something that is only temporary, usually for maybe the first couple of weeks after a patch. But at the moment, we're looking at about a 40% increase of new maps appearing. So Sus will appear more than Winterline and more than Mignano Gap. Just so that you can get to see it, you get to play on it more. Because we appreciate when the map pool gets larger, the chances of seeing new maps gets rarer and rarer. So it's just it's an easy thing that we can do on our end. We want you to try these new maps. We want you to enjoy them, and we don't want you to necessarily wait 4 to 6 games before you can see them.
Absolutely huge, especially considering we don't have a veto feature for maps. I think it's great that we're going to be able to jump straight into this map on day one and just get some reps in with the map, play it a bunch of times, get a feel for it back to back. It makes such a big difference. So I love this change.
So yeah, we're kicking that one through. Hopefully you'll notice the effects straight away.
All right. I'm seeing a lot of comments in the chat about community map. As we said, we're still, in progress. When we have something a little bit more concrete, we're obviously going to announce what's happening. But right now,
Absolutely.
we don't have anything new on that point to announce today, sadly. All right. So thank you, Will. We went over all of the gameplay and map changes now. Well, not all, because there's a lot of other little small things happening here and there, right? Now we're gonna go to Jason. Jason, how are you today?
Hello, hello.
Hello, hello. So, all right, Jason, there is big conversation points here about balance today. We have, general faction balance, which is the normal thing, but more specifically, what's happening with Africa Corps and Anti-Air.
Yeah, so for 1.3, we got basically two major things in, which is the balance pass for the DAC and the balance pass for anti-air. So I hope people are excited to hear that. Other than that, we've also done some minor tune-ups for the other factions, as typical of a normal balance patch. So getting into it a little bit. You know what? Let's start with the smallest things first.
Yes.
So we've gotten some minor tweaks for the Wehrmacht, the USF, and the Brits. USF's changes were fairly modest, but they were mostly to address kind of the armored build, rifleman spam in particular, some minor nerfs on that front.
Interesting. Very
in terms
interesting.
of the Wehrmacht, we gave some love to some of the more underused units in the faction. So some examples are like the Stummel, the Wirbelwind, as a few units. But for the most part, both of these factions haven't seen major changes. They're mostly like tweaks. Most of our focus has gone into the main deliverable of the DAC pass. So this isn't a full faction overhaul, just quick disclaimer out front. But we did do quite a few changes to kind of address what we see as kind of the pain points for DAC. One is they have a little bit of a lack of infantry diversity in the early game, especially if you go higher up the ladder. There's only really one or two viable ways of kind of opening as them, and we're trying to expand this, especially in terms of their infantry. So we have some changes to Panzer Grenadiers. We have some buffs to Bursas. We have added the Panzerjäger infantry unit to the core army. It is now in the tier 1 building.
Wow.
So quite a few.
Wow, that is a huge change. So okay, we're getting another buff and adjustment to P-Grens to make them even more viable, which I think is really important because they should be the staple and backbone of the DAC. And they're very versatile units. I'm curious to see what changes come when we read the actual patch notes on Wednesday. But second change was the Bursas, right, from the Italian Combined Arms battle group. I think that is the one battle group that really gives DAC a truly distinct flavor, right? A totally different path to take in terms of the build order itself. So I would really like to see the Bursas improved. I don't know exactly how they're going to do that. We'll see. But the Jaeger moving from a call-in to a tier 1 unit in the home base is absolutely huge for a couple reasons. DAC, of course, guys, if you guys are main DAC players or if you've been playing DAC and trying them out, I think right away you'll notice the weakness in terms of anti-tank. The Jaegers are decent units. They're only 4-man squads, so 4 models is a little vulnerable. But But the fact that you have them stuck to the call-ins means you're not going to be able to call in for the first 6 to 7 minutes, right? Based on the timing. And then from there, you're stuck. You've got to use a different anti-tank. You can invest 200 manpower into anti-tank grenades. It's very expensive. You need a lot of P-Grens on the field. You can go for martyrs, and so forth, anti-tank guns, but you're very limited. So the fact that you can, pump out a couple Jaegers, let's just say 2 Jaegers, and have that to kind of buy you time in the mid game is really going to open up, I think, the tech tree for the DAC. It's going to allow you to tech more smoothly, in my opinion. So you're going to be able to maybe get to those Panzer IIIs a little bit quicker, or have a little bit more of a stronger composition with more manpower and capping power on the map early on. Very interesting, especially with the half tracks, right? And kind of the DAC combined arms mechanized style of play. So I really like that change. I think that's something that many of you guys actually put in the comments from months back. So really interesting. But let's continue and hear what Jason has to say.
Few changes on that front. There's also a few other changes to the DAC, and we've also rearranged the Italian infantry battle group. So hopefully this should be a lot easier to integrate into 1v1s. We know that this battle group, while it's pretty popular in 4v4, it hasn't been as compelling in 1v1, so hopefully these changes can kind of address that. So yeah, some really big changes to DAC. Now, I know some are concerned, did we consider DAC to be weak, and we just overbuffed them? That wasn't the idea. It was more that we know that DAC was strong, but in very strange ways, and it had very clear weaknesses as well. Yeah. So we're trying to adjust the faction without increasing its power level overall, but we'll kind of see how that boils out. And then in terms of anti-air, I have done basically a major balance pass over all of the anti-air weapons and the air abilities. So now we're kind of moving to a new kind of system where all the AA pieces, we'll call them, are kind of standardized now. So they kind of do similar amounts of damage. So for players playing with or around AA, it's more about how many pieces you have, rather than having very bespoke relationships between all of them. There are some exceptions, like the 88 is definitely going to be more powerful than a Whirlwind, for example. But yeah. And the main change on this front is that all of the air off-map abilities have their durability kind of adjusted by class. So basically, strafes are 1 tier, diving bombs or bombing runs are 1 tier, recon are kind of there in their own tier, loiters in their own tier. They all have different amounts of durability, but the real big shift is 1 AA piece will now be able to shoot down strafes in certain scenarios. Not in every case, it won't completely shut down all strafes, but you will be able to shoot down strafes with just 1 AA piece, which is a very big difference from basically how we've had AA for most of the game.
Huge difference.
So hopefully that in 1v1, if you have access to anti-air, it actually has value. But also in team games, we've also balanced it so that roughly you need 2 pieces to cover an area of the map. So that way you can counter air, but there's still room for air to breathe, especially on the bigger team games where people can really get out quite a few AA pieces. And also, just be warned, there are also air abilities that are kind of high altitude or high durability. So like the carpet bomb from the airborne, you're not going to be really able to... you can still shoot them down with AA, but you're going to need a lot to really shoot them down. So yeah, that's kind of a really high level...
Okay, so really good change. I like the fact that you can take your AA and kind of stack them up and use that as an effective anti-air counter. I think anti-air was way too weak. They were almost obsolete in the game. They were relatively useless, in my opinion. I think many players feel that air power in this game is a little too strong. It's a really cool addition and feature in the game. I personally love it. I love the skill shots. I love the fact that you can call in air support, from the beginning of the game, the early game, all the way into the late game. And it gets progressively stronger. But there needs to be some counterplay. So I'm really happy to see that 1 AA, if we just take 1 AA, right, it can shoot down 1 strafe, 1 strafing plane, but not always, it sounds like from Jason, and not that effectively. But if you start stacking those pieces, let's say you have 2 AAs, or every player on your team has an AA, you guys keep those alive, you could really start shooting down these planes and force your opponent to now proactively adjust on the fly. And it creates more of like a dynamic push and pull from both teams. I think, yeah, air power that's just being called in constantly over and over and over from the beginning of the game gets a little bit abusive and a little gimmicky. So, you know, you're going to have to be mindful now. If you're opening with the USF Air Support Center and you start using the dive bombs and the strafing runs, expect your opponent to catch wind of that and say, okay, I need to get an AA. And then you're going to have to, as the American player, say, okay, I'm going to have to adjust, right? I'm going to have to account for that AA gun now. But also that AA gun has implications in his build that cost manpower, that cost fuel. He's using it to counteract your air. So there's going to be, it just, in my opinion, makes the whole interaction much more dynamic and just a better experience overall. So hopefully the AA is not too strong, of course, but I think it's a really good step in the right direction. We'll see what else is in store for faction balance, DAC changes, and anti-air. We don't know the full story yet. We're going to wait for those patch notes, but let's continue.
Most of those changes.
Yeah, there was some question about the 88 in chat. Do you want to touch that one?
What was it?
It was mostly like what's happening with it.
The 88 on its own is not being changed that much. So it's still going to be able to every now and then one-shot a plane from the sky, pretty much.
All right. All right. There's more questions. Can you tell us more about the P-Grand buff?
So for Panzergrens, the main change is kind of awkward with not having the notes, but like the main change is we're kind of doing what we did the last time as well. We're shifting some of the power off of combined arms on the unit back onto the unit base. So the unit's going to be even less reliant on, excuse me, having combined arms. Yeah, sorry. Like, so before, like way on release, like basically a third of the unit's power was on combined arms. The idea was that, like, if you had the bonus, it would be the most efficient combat unit, but if you didn't, it would be the least, which we found basically in practice to be a little too extreme, because it was really easy to kind of get in team games, but very difficult to kind of consistently maintain in 1v1 in particular. So we're toning that back. So it's still the case where Panzer Grenadiers are reliant on CC. Like that final bonus that they get really does make a difference in terms of their efficiency. But now it's not going to be as much of like, if you don't have the bonus, suddenly it's like an extremely terrible squad. So that's the main change for Panzergrens. So overall, they shouldn't be getting much stronger. Like if you play in team games, for example, you really shouldn't see a big difference in the strength of Panzer Grenadiers.
Yeah. So I'm seeing the chat going on, and I just want to note, like, we're not releasing the notes today. I'm sorry, everyone. That will come with the update next week. So this is really an overview of the changes that are coming. But Jason, yesterday when you were talking to me about those balance changes, you said something very specific that, you know, it's nice to do an overview, and but you'll know better when you have the game in your hand, right?
Yeah. It's quite important to not get too lost in all of the details and like play out some of the changes and see how they go.
All right. Well, I think we went over everything we had to chat about today. Anyone wants to add something here? Will, Miguel? Awesome. Okay, well,
Nothing from me.
this is my awkwardness as a host. Okay.
You're
all
doing
right.
fine.
No, thank you. Okay, so anyways, that will be all for today. Don't forget that we're releasing next week on Wednesday. And patch notes will be released sometime that day as well. And we'll see you on a stream in a few weeks for just a play session and playing on some community maps. So again, to stay up to date on all Company of Heroes 3 news, just follow us on social, Discord, join up the forums, and starting to the next update, look at the news in game. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a good week. We'll see you.
All right, guys. So honestly, I really like this update. I think it's going to bring a lot of improvements to gameplay, right? The unit responsiveness. Now, we don't know if there's an improvement to unit responsiveness in general. We saw some pretty specific cases and changes, which I think are all good. But there are some general unit responsiveness and input delay and changes that need to be made. So I'm very curious to see what the patch notes show on Wednesday. But beyond that, the faction balance is, of course, expected. DAC needs some major changes. I like that Relic is moving away from the combined arms in the sense that it's too restrictive, right? DAC is going to be more viable 1v1. DAC is really strong in team games in the later stages of the game. So it's going to be really interesting to see their overall power level, how it changes. I think DAC needs more variety in terms of battle groups, so I'm happy to see them focusing on that as well. But DAC is a very mechanized faction. They really do well with vehicles. Their economy is very manpower deficient. If you guys have played them, you'll always feel like you're kind of low on manpower. You really have to make the most out of your vehicles. So the fact that they're making that Panzergren more standard, more universal, right, less reliant on combined arms and other units, is going to be really good, I think, for the faction. I think it's going to really help just push DAC to a more stable, consistent development from early game to late game. AA, good change. And maps. I think the maps are awesome. Once again, I love the 4v4 map for reasons I stated before. In terms of my opinion on how Relic is progressing, it's slow progression, but it's steady progression and it's consistent. If you guys have been with these updates over the past 6 months, you will have noticed Jason and Miguel constantly standardizing unit archetypes. So standardizing anti-air, the damage they do, standardizing call-ins for airplanes, how quickly they come onto the map, standardizing anti-tank guns and unit damage or unit range, right? So they're trying to make it very consistent, and I think they're slowly getting the balance to where it needs to be. This year has really been marked by overall gameplay improvements, not a ton of content. We're not getting a lot of content with this update. We're getting really one new map and changes to a previous map, but we're moving towards that expansion in December. It's not far away, really only 2 months. And we're going to get hopefully a big content push. But again, more improvements to gameplay and factions. And I think by 2024, we're going to be off to a really good start. And I think, guys, the game, Relic is constantly updating. It may seem very slow, but I come from the StarCraft community. StarCraft 2 was a complete mess for like 4 years. It took Blizzard a long time to make changes. They weren't always the most responsive to the community. Relic is more responsive than you would think. I mean, they're really actively listening to everything, to the point that they're putting the Jaeger call-in as the main unit in the tier 1 building. That may seem like a little change. That's a pretty, they're willing to make these changes to the faction that need to be done, and they're making good changes. They may be going a little bit slower, but they're taking in the data and they're making the right changes. So it's a good update, and I'm really excited that it's coming in just a few days. Guys, I'll be playing probably a lot more 4v4s with the Sarge squad. If you guys are interested in joining a great community, we have a great group of guys in the Sarge GG Discord. You could join that through the channel. It'll be in the description below. Great group of guys, super active. You guys are welcome to join that, and I'm really excited for the game moving forward. If you guys found this video entertaining, helpful, go ahead and smash the like button, subscribe, leave a comment. It goes a long way in supporting the channel. And I'll see you guys on the next one.